Now, my mission is to help women in the workplace and in their personal lives and relationships with productivity and progression, with mental and physical well-being. I do this in a way that you might not have come across before. That's because, as Christine said, I'm an evolutionary biologist, and I take a biological approach to understanding and improving relationships and behaviour. So there are many methods that people use to develop ourselves, to improve our productivity. But many of these turn out not to work because sometimes they fail to take into account our human natures. So looking at things through a biological lens allows us to see why we've evolved certain behaviours and habits and feelings, and why there's so much variation among us. And that understanding points us to ways of helping ourselves improve things and actually work with our natures. So today I'm going to use that approach to talk about relationships among women in the workplace and how women have evolved to compete with each other. So first of all, though, I'm going to explain a bit more about why taking an evolutionary approach is useful in understanding and improving relationships. So basically, there are different ways of looking at human behaviour. We can look at our social environment. So we can, look at what the media is telling us, what our social norms are kind of driving us to do, and social norms of our culture. Or we can ask how our behaviour develops as we're growing up. What kind of effect does our family environment have, the relationships we have as we're growing up. Now, these are very important and obviously valid ways of studying human behaviour. And I certainly do look at things in that way, and I'll include aspects of those in tonight's talk. But because I'm an evolutionary biologist, I also ask why we've evolved the behaviours that we have. What's the behaviour for? How does it help our species, why has this behaviour survived in our species, basically? Generally, it comes down to the fact that we behave in ways that helped our ancestors to reproduce and pass on their genes. In other words, we're all designed for having babies. We all come from a long, unbroken line of ancestors who have behaved in such a way as to successfully survive, have children, and have those children survive long enough to have children of their own. If that weren't the case, we wouldn't be sitting here to be able to have this discussion. So because of this, we will have inherited the genetic disposition for some of these behaviours. The people in the past who behaved in ways that didn't lead to babies, that didn't lead them to survive, their lineage has died out and their genetic legacy is gone. So anyway, what that means is that a lot of our behavioural tendencies nowadays will be geared towards being good at survival and reproduction, whether we consciously want to have children or not. Obviously nowadays a lot of people decide not to have kids, and we can do that because there's contraception available. But we still behave in a way that's related to maximising our genetic legacy in terms of our relationships. But unfortunately, those behavioural tendencies and ways of doing relationships aren't necessarily going to be compatible with being happy in our relationships. They're not necessarily going to be what's best for us in a work environment in terms of cooperating together. That's partly because our environment nowadays is a bit different, obviously, from what it was when in our ancestors' time back in the Stone Age. And we have different needs today and different ways of being successful compared with our ancestors. But if we can understand how we're likely to behave or feel, we should be able, to some extent, be able to predict what's going to happen in particular situations, and perhaps change the situation a person's working in, or change our attitudes to lead to a better outcome if we understand where it's all coming from. Or if we're aware of how we're likely to behave or feel, we are capable of modifying this. It's not like we're slaves to our evolved natures. So for example, we have evolved a craving for foods with lots of fat and sugar in them. And that's because in our evolutionary past, there wasn't much of that kind of food around. So we had to kind of eat as much as possible whenever we got the chance, just to make sure we had, our energy levels were kept up. Unfortunately, because nowadays we have easy access to this kind of food, we can easily overindulge, and a lot of us do. So there's a bit of a mismatch between our evolved natures and our current situation. But if you see a cream bun sitting on a plate in front of you, you can choose not to eat it. It might not be easy because we've got this evolved disposition to really want to eat that cream bun, but just like we have health warnings about different kinds of food, we can also look out for potentially destructive behaviours in relationships as well. Now, of course, the different ways of looking at behaviour that I described, they're all relevant. The tendencies we have as a result of our genetic heritage interact with our development and interact with our culture and expectations of our culture to produce the behaviour that we see.